George had already been through 2 marriages before Angela stepped into the picture. Both unions had fizzled out in under a year each time. The women moved on to what they saw as greener pastures. Despite being good-looking and smart, George hadn't exactly struck gold in life. He held a steady job at a factory, pulling in a modest paycheck, just like his folks, who'd both spent their lives on the factory floor until retirement. He seemed destined for the same quiet, unremarkable path. He first crossed paths with Angela at the clinic, and the moment he laid eyes on her, he was smitten. Angela, a petite blonde with a gentle presence, worked as a nurse at the hospital. Fresh out of college, she'd landed the job not long before. George, utterly captivated, pursued her with a kind of fervent, clumsy charm. But at first, she wasn't having any of it. In fact, she thought he was beneath her. Still, her mother gently nudged her not to turn her nose up at what life had offered, better to take a sure thing than wait around for something that might never come. So, after a lot of back and forth, Angela gave in and agreed to a date. Eventually, more out of resignation than passion, she accepted his proposal. Deep down, the thought of being the last unmarried one in her circle of friends had started to eat at her. The years ticked by. Then, when Angela went on maternity leave for the first time, the cracks began to show. Money got tight. George's paycheck stayed the same, but their bills sure didn't. He dug in his heels at the idea of switching jobs, which baffled and irritated Angela. Their already shaky relationship started to teeter. And then came a second pregnancy, completely unplanned. The news hit her like a punch in the gut. She cried for days. Desperate to stay afloat, she reached out to an old contact and landed a position at a private clinic. Angela clung to that job not just for financial reasons, but for something more complicated, something darker. The baby growing inside her wasn't George's. It was the result of an affair with a married doctor at the clinic. He had no intentions of leaving his wife, and she knew better than to push the issue. Trying to claim paternity might cost her the job, maybe even everything. The thought of ending up divorced, alone, raising 2 kids with no backup, it terrified her. So, she kept her secret tucked away, telling no one, not even her closest confidants. Back at home, George noticed her becoming distant, her moods shifting like the wind. She chalked it up to exhaustion and work stress, and he, ever trusting, didn't press the matter. There was a strange thrill in leading this double life. The affair fed something in her: control, validation, maybe even revenge. Her lover gave her money without asking questions, and she spent it freely. Their daily rendezvous in his office became routine, while her loyal husband sat at home, blissfully unaware of the betrayal. Eventually, there was no hiding her growing belly. Still, she kept quiet, unsure how to even begin explaining the truth. Then one afternoon, after yet another hurried encounter, her lover brought it up. He stood in front of her, straightening his shirt, hair a mess, cheeks still flushed. Angela felt herself pulled in 2 directions: admiration for him, and a deep, gnawing worry about the life that was taking shape inside her. The man looked at her with that familiar, faintly mocking grin, as if he'd seen this coming all along and had just been waiting for Angela to say the words out loud. She dropped her gaze, lips pressed tightly together, offering nothing. Then came the question, short and sharp. Whose? She lifted her shoulders in a helpless shrug. He didn't flinch. Calmly, almost indifferently, he spelled out his position. Whether the child was his or not didn't matter to him. He had no interest in acknowledging it. Still, he reassured her that he wouldn't cut her off entirely. She'd stay in her role as his mistress for now. That night, Angela finally broke the news to George. He was thrilled, lit up with joy. He didn't question her flimsy excuse about how she hadn't realized she was pregnant sooner. Angela, on the other hand, was anything but calm. Deep down, she knew the odds of the child being George's were slim to none. Their marriage had lost its spark long ago, and intimacy between them had become rare, almost mechanical. Yet there he was, carefully putting together a crib, cheerfully sharing the news with their older son, beaming with pride. Angela watched it all with a heavy heart, the dread creeping in stronger each day as she imagined how he'd react when the truth inevitably surfaced. Despite her growing belly and the rising tension at home, her lover didn't distance himself. He kept in touch. Around the hospital, people whispered behind cupped hands about her frequent stops by the neurology department. On one of those quiet visits, he casually tossed a stack of bills on the desk and said, "You'll need a paternity test once the baby's born. Call me, I'll handle it." Unlike George, who spoke little and felt even less, this man could talk for hours, and Angela found that strangely comforting. He was everything her husband wasn't, different in the way he looked, the way he moved, the way he carried himself. And she was still madly in love with him. That made it worse. She hadn't seen him in 2 months, ever since going on maternity leave. Not a single message, not a call. But she wasn't shocked. He had his own life, his own home, his own children, and no room for a mistress and a maybe baby. The silence gnawed at her, slowly. Now, she was back under George's care full-time. The money her lover had once slipped her wasn't enough anymore, and worse than the financial strain was her deepening resentment. George smiled at her more now, unaware of the truth, and each grin made her skin crawl. Sometimes she caught herself dreaming of walking away from it all, just vanishing, leaving them all behind. The day contractions started, she entered the maternity ward and quietly let the doctor know a DNA test would be needed after delivery. The physician glanced at her wedding ring but didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Everything was already written in the lines of her face. And then it happened. The baby, tiny, warm, and new, was placed gently on her chest. Angela looked down and saw traces of him in the newborn's features, so vivid, so unmistakable. Tears streamed down her face. No more wondering, no more waiting. The truth had arrived with the child. George, meanwhile, was overwhelmed with joy. In the delivery room, he bent over her with gratitude in his eyes and whispered a thank you for giving him a daughter. Shane clung to Angela like a second skin. Every passing moment felt like a countdown to the inevitable, the moment George would finally see what she had long feared he'd notice. At the hospital, when he first cradled their daughter in his arms, he lingered on her features just briefly. Her complexion, the fine line of her jaw, the soft curve of her cheek, all seemed innocent enough. Babies, after all, come in all shapes and colors. But it was at home, in the privacy of their quiet living room, that the truth hit him like a punch to the chest. He peeled back the blanket, gently lifted her cap, and stared. The child's thick, dark hair and sharply defined eyebrows didn't match his. Not even close. He froze, and as he turned toward the mirror, his gaze caught Angela's reflection. She stood in the doorway, silent, her eyes swollen and wet with tears, as if her guilt had been waiting for this exact moment to spill over. George said nothing at first. He didn't have to. Angela stepped forward and, trembling, laid everything bare. Every secret, every lie. She told him the whole story. The fury that rose in him was immediate and all-consuming. This woman, his wife, his partner, the mother of his children, had lied to his face, betrayed him behind his back, and let him believe he was the father of a child that wasn't his. Everything inside him shattered. He left that night, slamming the door behind him, and didn't come back until the next evening. When he did return, his face was hollowed out with rage and hurt. He didn't speak. He simply placed a stack of papers on the kitchen table, divorce documents. Angela didn't argue. She couldn't. The weight of what she'd done eclipsed every excuse. George asked only one thing: their eldest son would stay with him. And Angela, drained and defeated, didn't object. She understood she couldn't manage both children alone, not with her job, not with her guilt, not with the man she'd pinned her hopes on, retreating from her life like smoke through open fingers. The DNA test had confirmed what she already knew. Her lover was the biological father, but true to his word, he refused to claim the child. No visits, no acknowledgement. On occasion, he sent small amounts of money, just enough to feel like he hadn't vanished completely, but never enough to matter. Left with few options, Angela packed what little she had and returned to her mother's home. Her mother welcomed her, but the disappointment in her eyes cut deep. Angela had chased after a life she believed would look like everyone else's: husband, children, a pretty house, but instead, she'd upended not just her own world, but George's, her son's, and now this newborn daughter's too. In the end, the cost of that pursuit was far higher than she'd ever imagined.